The His Girl Friday podcast is brought to you in part by Messenger Fellowship, living the kingdom, fulfilling the call, proclaiming the truth. Good afternoon, one and all. This is Cameron Fry, His Girl Friday, coming at you 2:30 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon. This won't be a typical pod, though I will consider how I post this moving forward. For now, I just wanted to share the audio version to my latest blog post, Dust in the Wind, the beauty in being, quote, dirty, unquote. This is one of my shorter blogs, barely 500 words, and a lot of that comes from some lyrics that I'm about to share with you, but I'll go ahead and spoil the lead, unbury it, if you will. Just open up about the premise. We can go from there. The reason why I like to share the audio version to my writings is a lot of you are on the go, and that's great. You live life on the tip of your toes, as do I. Sometimes stopping to read is less likely than being able to listen to something, especially the convenience of having wireless headphones, phones in general. There's so many different ways to listen to audio-based content. So, joining the party. But without further ado, let's jump into what does it mean to relish our dustly identity, if you will. And a lot of this comes to, or rather inspired by, an oldie I heard on the radio last week. I would say maybe 80-90% of Americans who are maybe older than 35, 40 years old will remember when Kansas was big and their hit Dust in the Wind. I was fortunate enough to listen to it again with a fresh pair of ears. I closed my eyes, and I'm not going to read the whole part of it. The whole song, just my favorite part. I close my eyes only for a moment, and the moment's gone. All my dreams pass before my eyes with curiosity. Dust in the wind. All they are is dust in the wind. Sounds depressing, right? Like a poor man's romantic anthem to Ecclesiastes. That book opens up with meaningless. Meaningless, says the teacher. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. That seems more dramatic, actually, because with at least Kansas is more referring to his hopes and dreams, maybe not so much his identity. But our author in Ecclesiastes, I'll get to his name momentarily, he just comes out of the gate firing. And there's a lot of context left on the table. I get it. He's not saying we are meaningless, that our purpose is meaningless. But without Jesus, without God, a holy creator, designer of absolute good, there's no meaning apart from what has been divinely appointed. Our hopes and dreams, going back to the Kansas song, those lyrics can seem maddening to some. My grid is already built in by faith. I've been a Christian for many years now. So it's not as upsetting when I hear that, but I could understand to someone who is lost, who may not know God, may not be aware of the good news. They're like, well, that doesn't sound promising. And I know Kansas isn't scripture, but certainly Ecclesiastes is. And it's just like, well, what about my God-given purpose? If there is a God, like if he's a God of love, then why would so much be meaningless? What about my God-given purpose is meaningless? Is it void, useless, just a vain rat race under the sun? Is all of this just vain and vain? No, hardly. If anything, following these lyrics and seeing where they touch in the scriptures, there's an affirming contrast, even considering the opening chapters in Genesis. There is a contrast, and it's one that marks not only our earthly identity, but vocational calling. This is a marketplace ministry blog, so there's almost always going to be a tie-in, not just life itself, but specifically to what we do within our careers. So for the next few minutes, I want us to consider the difference between chaff and dust. I know, probably didn't expect need to go there and to hear some theology regarding the difference. But hear me out. And I probably should have mentioned, not only was this post inspired by Kansas, but a conversation before that radio moment with my cousin. He's 25, 26 years old, up in Tacoma, Washington. And he's learning some hard lessons and some ropes in corporate America, just how, I guess unsettled is a word, how turbulent it could be, how wild and unpredictable it could be. Chaff and dust. When exploring the reasons why we live, chances are we're not considering byproducts of grain processing. But the word is clear. Our physical bodies were created from dust and will return to as such. There it is, Genesis 3:19. Again, sounds depressing, but I promise it's uphill from here. With eternity in mind. And that's the key. We cannot possibly fathom and comprehend this reality, these truths, without eternity in mind. We must accept this metaphor as core to our emptiness, our finiteness. While dust may seem unpleasant by definition, it is pure. It is a pure particle, occasionally suspended in air, but designed to settle. Whereas chaff is a scaly covering intended to be separated or burned. This explains why in the Psalms, in the wisdom books, there's references to chaff in the context of iniquity, wickedness, sin. Chaff is something that must go or change. Chaff can be purified, but in order for that to happen, it must become a new creation entirely, where it's really not chaff anymore. With dust, it's already fine and capable of influencing everything from cloud formation to nutrient cycling. That was a pleasant reminder for me. We think dust is just something to get rid of. We actually synonymize dust and perhaps chaff a little bit too much. We think dust is a negative thing, but that's one of the purposes, the goals of this pod/blog is us to reconfigure in our minds how we perceive dust. We're scared of it because we know that someday we are going to just be that. I have context in my bedroom all the time. Juju's ashes from her cremation 3 years ago, her dust, if you will, kind of lives in proximity to me every day. So again, this perspective is locked and loaded, and I've had time to not be discouraged about it. But maybe for you, this is tough to tie to the surface. Let me help you further, where we could find some personal meaning. Although all our bodies, I don't care, you may be shredded, you may be a bodybuilder, you may be a professional football player, wrestler, whatever. Although our bodies are fragile pillars, albeit with mind, heart, soul, and spirit, it's still a sacred vessel because God is the designer of it and God is sacred. So it was built by sacred hands. The vessel is intended as sacred, and it's created for finding rest and inspiring growth, even in times of displacement and turbulence. Kind of like, dust, as I've just described. Some of you listening to this may be caught in chaotic currents or stuck in a false sense of worthlessness. You may feel as low as dust, easily swept away in the wind, not strong enough to stand in your own strength. But I challenge you, friends, to see the beauty in that. If all else, stand firm. Ephesians 6:13. If you can't stand, then settle in Jesus with every intention to rely on him to carry you. You may feel like you're passing away moment by moment, and we are, technically. Not to sound too morbid, but every second we get closer to meeting Jesus. Actually, putting it that way, that sounds pretty exciting, right? I think, though, our mortality is a little bit of a sore subject. I don't think anyone really likes to think about it too much. If anything, we want to be maturing in our vitality, right? We want to be able to improve in some way, and we can, but I think as I'm not far from 40, I'm closer to 40 than 30. I know that my peak, I'm every day that passes, I'm further from my physical prime, my peak. Certainly things can mature, but a lot of that's unseen, right? To what can be seen, it's more maintenance and upkeep and exercise, healthy habits that will help sustain and prolong my life. So it's an investment in longevity, but left without a precipitous, without being intentional and having healthy rhythms and patterns of life, my body is starting to waste away. Again, it sounds sad, when you put it like that. But with eternity in mind, it flips the hourglass on its head. And faith can arise when we flip it, essentially. You may be going through a really tough season right now. Trust me, I know how tough seasons can be. I think about where I was 2 years ago, specifically when autistic burnout was colliding with bereavement grief, and there was no manual to reference. Like, how am I going to survive this, Lord? I mean, I could read your word, but I don't see anything. It's hard to find something that can really speak to what I'm going through at the surface. What does the Bible say about autistic burnout? Probably nothing specifically to that. Bereavement grief, well, there's certainly, God can relate to having lost a son, granted divine, fully divine, and, he would ascend to the heavenlies again. So, the comparison between, me having lost a child, God having lost a child, it sometimes, feels like apples and oranges. But I know what it's like for God to relate to our grief, and he in his divinity and humanity, he wept at times. He knows what it's like to be discouraged and sad, and even just people not knowing who he was, like how his love was not known and understood, and thus could not be abided in. Like, that had to have been discouraging. But he referenced the Father, so he kept going, and he was still a man without sin and was still pure. And we have certainly plenty of blueprint in handling grief, although we are finite again. We are flesh and blood. We are dust. Even with that spirit within, the realm in which God's spirit occupies, it could be so tough to move forward. We might get there, but sometimes we take detours, scenic routes, as I like to call them. And certainly a couple of years ago, Liz and I took our fair share of scenic detours, because if there was a path you could yellow brick and pave and make straight, I think it was just hard for us to see. We were living in this haze, and that's why our heart has compassion and grace for those who are going through times of, maybe not quite like that, but similar in some ways. Some of you may be close to someone who passed away. You could feel debilitated for a long time. There's no timetable on grief. The autistic burnout, that's personal. I know, I've been on the spectrum for about a year now, so that's just something new. Prior to 2024, didn't have that awareness, but pretty much, around the first few quarters of 2024, as I started to go deeper with my son's autism, I realized, through assessment and professional evaluation, this is kind of passed down. And here I actually know I could tell you in a separate time just how it's been passed down through my family tree. Giving you an example of just a really tough time. But I think back about being dust and all of the pain associated with life. There's an expiration on it, and it's not going to last forever. The hell we feel like we're walking through, those tough seasons, there's an expiration. They may go longer. They may end up, being cut off shorter than we expected. But even if you feel low as dust, easily swept away in the wind of that struggle, not strong enough to stand in your own strength, rejoice. That's the whole point of strength and weakness, being able to rely upon God's absolute strength. And there's beauty in that. There's beauty in weakness relying upon holy strength. There's a strength in recognizing that we can't do it on our own, that we are dust. But even as we're going through tough times, we could still be mobile. We may feel like we're caught in a really, turbulent jet stream, but we could still influence growth as we vertically rise towards the heavens. Just like actual dust, we can encourage precipitation. We can, which, in turn encourages growth at the surface. I just love what dust can do. And then after it fulfills its purpose, it's supposed to find a resting place. And I hope that for some of you listening, or really all of you listening, that you could find a point of settling in the Spirit. It may take supernatural effort. God working in you, and that's totally fine. But you need to press in fully. Whatever chains, whatever obstacles you're tolerating that are holding you back, anything that you know just needs to go. There's chaff in all of us. And I encourage you to bring your chaff to the Father so that you may be purified and fully sanctified. No cutting corners now. Like, you probably know what needs to go. Don't hold on to it. Don't look back. Keep enduring with character, persevering, and pressing forward. I challenge you, my friends, to see the beauty in all of this, to recognize your, quote, dirty, unquote, your dusty identity, and how you could still, even when you're not where you want to be, i.e. settled on the surface of your choosing, you're vertically rising, you are providing rich nutrients to cloud formation, which brings the precipitation and the rain that falls, and it feeds into other rivers, and suddenly you're a small speck of dust, but you're contributing to the replenishing of water that sustains life. That's where I'm going with this today. You, as a speck of dust, can contribute to a vast ocean, rivers of life, livings of living water. You may feel like you're passing away, sure. However, rather than waiting in insecurity, dare to consider where you're passing away to. We're all going somewhere. Are we going closer to the Father, becoming more like Jesus, or the opposite? Because truth is, God can use you even if you feel like dust in the wind. He can use you to inspire vertical growth as you wisp for His glory. He can strengthen you as you sow and position seeds in tough terrain to receive what they need to flourish. I could go on. Just remember, none of this is possible without the creator and sustainer of dust. Hence why I believe it's Koheleth. I believe the author of Ecclesiastes prologues his book with meaningless. As life is meaningless without the answer and the reason of life. How sweet it is to know with His breath He purified us from the ground, so the ground would have no ultimate authority over our final destination. Yet, even as we come back to this in life, we can fulfill God's original design for our lives. I'll say that again. Even as we come back to it in this life, the ground, we could fulfill God's original design for our lives. So cheers to being dust in the wind alongside you. Selah. And remember, friends, be excellent to each other. Because as I was talking, I was thinking about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and how they run into Socrates, or Socrates as they call him. Doing that whole, trying to philosophize with him. All we are, and I could see Ted, Keanu Reeves, his noob face, and his, God bless his accent. His 1989 San Dimas High School, just beach bum type accent. All we are is dust in the wind, dude. So yeah, got me. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a cult classic. All right, for real, signing off. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. Catch you on the fry as always. Cheers. Peace.